I met Julia during a work trip to San Diego. It was one of those 3-day industry conferences where the coffee's bad, the name tags are peeling off by lunch, and everyone pretends to be more interested than they really are. I was manning a booth for the data analytics firm I worked at, and she was one of the speakers, giving a talk on branding and digital presence. I didn't know that at the time. I just noticed her passing by with a quick glance at our banner and a wry smile before saying, "Your logo gives me a headache." That was Julia. Sharp, playful, direct. I laughed. We exchanged maybe 4 sentences before she disappeared into the crowd, but I found myself looking for her everywhere after that. A few days later, I sent her a message, half professional, half hopeful, and to my surprise, she responded. We grabbed dinner the next time we were both in New York for another event. That dinner turned into a string of conversations, long phone calls, and a cross-country whirlwind that ended with her moving into my place a little over a year later. Life with Julia is a balance of rhythms. She works in PR and communications, a field that has her juggling clients, launching campaigns, and occasionally flying out for events. I do consulting work from home, a little steadier, a little quieter. Our schedules are often out of sync, but we've made it work. There's a kind of dance to our days, her phone buzzing in the kitchen while I'm sipping coffee on the balcony, her coming home energized from a pitch while I've been neck-deep in spreadsheets. Our home isn't extravagant, but it's ours. A 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone, with creaky floors and windows that let in just enough morning light to make the living room feel warm, even in winter. Julia's added her touch to the space, abstract prints, bold furniture choices, a weird cactus that looks like it's been struggling for 3 years. I handle the practical stuff, bills, fixes, the kind of boring things she thanks me for with a kiss on the cheek and a sarcastic, "You're my hero." We've been together 6 years now. Most people assume we've been married for a while, but the truth is we never rushed that part. We talked about it, casually, sometimes over wine, sometimes when one of our friends got engaged. But there was never pressure. Our life felt full already. We had routines, inside jokes, weekend rituals. Sunday mornings were for French press coffee and croissants. Weeknights were a mix of shared cooking and her trying to get me into one of her reality TV obsessions. It's the kind of life that feels solid, not flashy, but warm, familiar, ours. One of the things I've always appreciated about Julia is how much life she brings into a space. She has this way of walking into a room and making it feel like something's happening, even if it's just her muttering to herself while rearranging the spice rack for the 3rd time in a month. She keeps things moving. I keep things in place. It's a rhythm that works for us. Our days aren't glamorous, but they have their own sort of quiet charm. I usually wake up before she does. I make the coffee, open the blinds, check my emails. Julie is not a morning person, not in the slightest. She'll shuffle into the kitchen half awake, hair wild, muttering complaints about the sun being too loud or the floor being too cold for this nonsense. But she always smiles when she sees the mug waiting for her. Her job can be chaotic. Some days, she's locked in back-to-back virtual meetings, pitching strategy to a brand on one call and managing a crisis on the next. Other times, she's pacing the apartment rehearsing for a presentation, pausing only to ask my opinion on whether something sounds confident or condescending. I nod, offer feedback when she wants it, and mostly just stay out of her way. She's good at what she does, confident, assertive, quick on her feet. Watching her in her element has always impressed me. Evenings are when we reconnect. We eat dinner together most nights, whether it's something elaborate she felt inspired to cook or Thai takeout with the containers spread out on the coffee table. We have a small ritual of sharing one good thing about our day, even if it's something tiny. "I nailed a client pitch," she'll say. "My code actually worked the first time," I'll offer. Sometimes it's just, "I didn't spill coffee on myself." The point is less what we say and more that we say it. Weekends are a mix of rest and small adventures. We'll go to the farmer's market, take long walks through the park, hit up estate sales just to wander through old houses and talk about what we do differently. Occasionally, we'll host friends for game nights or brunch, and Julia takes great pride in curating a playlist that somehow always includes 90s pop and at least one French cafe song. We travel a few times a year, nothing extravagant, but enough to keep things interesting. A cabin in the woods for her birthday, a beach town in the off-season, a spontaneous weekend road trip just because we need to escape the algorithm, as she puts it. Our life isn't perfect, but it's real. It's built from the small things, shared routines, inside jokes, the ease of knowing someone so well that you finish their thoughts before they do. We've built something steady, something that, for all its imperfections, feels like home. If I had to pick a word to describe our relationship, it would be familiar, but not in a dull way. More like the kind of familiarity you grow into, the kind that softens the sharp edges of your life. We knew each other's moods without speaking, shared glances across crowded rooms that said more than words could. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the everyday things we never had to explain. Julia knew how I took my coffee without asking. I knew the exact point she'd pause while reading and chew on her thumbnail, lost in thought. We had our own language made up of half-sentences, eye rolls, and ridiculous inside jokes that made no sense to anyone but us. Our routines were lived in, comfortable, the kind you build not just out of habit, but out of care. We didn't need to talk about everything because so much was already understood. Every now and then, I'd catch her in one of those unguarded moments, sitting on the floor organizing her scarves by color, dancing in the kitchen to music that only she could hear, talking to the cat like it was a coworker. It always reminded me why I fell for her in the first place. She was chaotic and composed in equal measure, with this rare mix of intellect and mischief that kept me both grounded and slightly off balance. She made me try things I wouldn't have on my own: yoga classes, quinoa bowls, an entire weekend of silent meditation that I still tease her about. In return, I gave her steadiness. She once told me that I was the only part of her life that didn't feel like a performance. "You're the pause button in the middle of the noise," she said one night, her head on my shoulder. That stayed with me. We weren't flashy. We didn't flood social media with curated snapshots or anniversary tributes. Most people probably assumed we were already married, and in a way, it felt like we were. We'd built a life that functioned like a partnership: shared finances, a joint savings goal for a down payment, Google Calendar invites for dentist appointments and work trips. We talked about the future with confidence, not as a maybe, but as a given. Whenever friends asked when we were finally going to tie the knot, we'd just laugh it off. There was no rush. We had time. Or so I believed. I thought we were on the same page. I thought we wanted the same things. I thought I knew what kind of story we were writing. It was a Thursday night when she brought it up, just casually enough to catch me completely off guard. We were sitting on the couch, halfway through a documentary we'd both lost interest in. I had my arm resting behind her, and she had her feet tucked under her. Then, out of nowhere, she muted the TV, turned toward me, and said, "What would you think about opening up the relationship?" I thought she was joking. Honestly, I laughed. I looked at her face, expecting a smirk, some punchline. But she didn't laugh. She was dead serious. "What?" I asked, more confused than anything. "I mean, we've been together for a long time," she said, her voice almost too calm. "People change. Needs change. It doesn't have to be a bad thing." I just stared at her. "Where is this coming from?" She gave a shrug, as if it was the most natural topic in the world. "I've just been thinking. There's this concept of relationship evolution, not tying all your needs to one person, creating space for growth." I stopped her there. "Julia, is there someone else?" Her expression shifted for a split second, just enough to notice. Then she shook her head. "No, this isn't about someone. It's about us. About giving each other freedom. Don't you ever wonder what it would be like, just to explore?" I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I was confused. Hurt in a quiet, sinking way. "Why now?" She paused. I don't want us to get stagnant. I want us to last. This is one way people are making it work these days." It sounded rehearsed, like something she read on a blog and practiced saying to herself in the mirror. I asked her again if this was really what she wanted. She nodded. And I said no. It wasn't even a hard decision for me. I told her I believed in commitment, in partnership, not half measures. If something wasn't working between us, we should talk about it. But opening up the relationship? That wasn't an option. Not for me. I told her it would tear everything apart. She was quiet after that. Said she understood, that she appreciated my honesty. We sat there in silence for a while, the muted documentary still flickering in the background. Eventually, she got up and said she was going to bed early. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept circling back to the way she asked. The timing. The expression on her face when I refused. I didn't know it yet, but something had already shifted. While I was clinging to what we'd built, she had already started walking away from it. And a week later, she'd do exactly what she promised she wouldn't. After Julia brought up the open marriage, something in the air between us changed, not immediately, but in the way you don't notice a plant dying until one day the leaves are brittle and curling. She said she respected my decision. said she was fine keeping things the way they were. But in the days that followed, her energy shifted. She wasn't cold exactly, but distant. Like she was somewhere else even when she was right next to me. We still went through the motions, dinner together, occasional TV, our shared grocery list on the fridge. But the conversations felt thinner, stretched over silences that didn't used to be there. She'd smile and nod at things I said, but her eyes didn't follow. Sometimes she'd be scrolling through her phone with this little grin, and I'd ask what was funny, and she'd just shake her head. Nothing. Just a meme. The changes were subtle, but they added up. She started going out more. Not a lot, just enough to notice. Work dinners. Happy hours. Meetups with old friends. I'd never heard her mention before. When I asked who she was seeing, she'd always give me the same breezy response. Just a few people from the PR world. You wouldn't know them. I didn't press. I told myself she needed space. That maybe she was just trying to recalibrate after that awkward conversation about the open relationship. I wanted to believe that. But I'd catch little things. A scent I didn't recognize on her coat. A new dress she didn't mention buying. She'd be gone longer than she said she would, and when she came back, she'd be full of energy, more animated than I'd seen her in weeks, but somehow not present with me. It felt like she was glowing from something I wasn't part of. One night she came home late, after midnight, claiming her dinner meeting ran long. She smelled like wine and a hint of cologne that wasn't mine. I asked if everything went okay, and she said, "Yeah, it was just a lot of catching up. You know how it is." Then she kissed me on the cheek and went straight to the shower. I stood in the kitchen long after the water started running, staring at the spot where her shoes used to always land near the door. Now they were always placed neatly to the side, almost too neatly, like she was careful about every move she made. I didn't know what to think. There was no scene, no confrontation, just the uneasy quiet of not knowing what you're allowed to feel when you don't have anything solid to point to. I told myself I was being paranoid. That relationships go through strange phases. That people shift and stretch and settle again. But deep down, I could feel something slipping, and I didn't know if I could catch it in time. It's strange how quickly something familiar can become unfamiliar. One minute you're living your usual life, brushing your teeth next to someone you know like the back of your hand, and the next you're glancing at them sideways, wondering when exactly they became a stranger. Julia had always had phases of pulling inward, times when she got hyper-focused on work or needed space to recharge. I knew that about her. I learned to respect it. But this time felt different. It wasn't retreat. It was absence. Even when she was sitting next to me, she wasn't there. Her responses were delayed, distracted, sometimes off-topic entirely. It was like talking to someone with a hand on the doorknob. She started sleeping later on weekends. Not unusual in itself, but she stopped inviting me to join her on the errands we used to run together, farmer's market, dry cleaning, wandering around the bookstore with coffee in hand. I asked if she wanted company once, and she looked at me like I'd asked something odd. "It's just a few quick stops," she said. "You'd be bored." There were also changes in how she touched me or didn't. Her kisses felt automatic. Her hugs were brief. We hadn't been intimate in weeks. When I brought it up gently one night, she gave me a look I couldn't read and said she was just tired. "Work's draining me," she said. "I need to decompress." "It's not you." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But the feeling of not knowing started creeping into everything. I began to second-guess her stories, where she went, who she was with, why she suddenly needed her own space at the coffee table to get in the zone for work. She took more calls outside the apartment, often stepping out onto the balcony or into the bedroom and closing the door. When I asked who it was, she'd wave it off. Just a client. Nothing exciting. There wasn't anything overt. Nothing dramatic. Just small disconnects. A missed detail in a story she'd already told, a smile that seemed too forced, a tension in her shoulders when I walked into the room unexpectedly. I wasn't spying. I wasn't tracking her or checking her phone. That wasn't who I was, and I didn't want to become that person. But I was starting to live in a constant state of quiet doubt, the kind that wears you down more than any argument ever could. Every time I tried to reconnect, a surprise dinner, a walk through our old neighborhood, a suggestion to get out of town for the weekend, she smiled and nodded but never followed through. "Things are just really busy right now," she'd say. "Let's talk about it next week." But next week never came. Instead, I found myself lying awake more often, staring at the ceiling while she snored softly beside me, wondering who exactly she was when she left the apartment in that new perfume I didn't recognize. And if, maybe, She'd already walked away without telling me. It caught me off guard when Julia brought up the idea of buying a house. We were having dinner, something simple, pasta and leftover wine from the weekend, when she looked up from her plate and said, "Have you thought about where we might want to settle down? Like long-term?" I blinked. "You mean outside the city?" She nodded, twirling her fork slowly. "Yeah, maybe. Somewhere quieter. We could get more space, finally have that home office you keep talking about. Maybe even a yard. I don't know. Just thinking ahead." I stared at her, trying to match the woman in front of me with the one who'd been disappearing from our shared life inch by inch for weeks. This was the same person who had recently seemed so detached, who kept her phone close and her answers vague. And now here she was, talking about paint colors and square footage like nothing between us had shifted. It made me question everything. Was I reading too much into things? Was the distance I'd been feeling just a phase? Maybe she really had just needed time, and this was her way of coming back to me. Maybe we were okay after all. The thought made me want to breathe easier, but something still didn't sit right. There was something in her tone. Excited? Yes, but almost performative. Like she was reading from a script about stability. Still, I went along with it. We spent the next few nights browsing listings on her laptop, passing it back and forth while curled up on the couch. She was especially drawn to mid-century homes with big windows. "I want light," she kept saying. "I'm tired of this cave." I told her I didn't mind the apartment, but I understood what she meant. We'd outgrown it, in a way, or maybe we'd just outgrown the version of ourselves we were when we first moved in. She started making lists, mortgage brokers, neighborhoods with good schools, even though we hadn't seriously discussed kids. She even created a shared folder for our future home vision, filled with screenshots of furniture, paint swatches, landscaping ideas. Watching her throw herself into it made me feel guilty for all the suspicion I'd been carrying. I wondered if I'd built a narrative in my head that wasn't real, just because things had felt off. This, right here, felt real. Or at least it looked like it. But then there were the little things that kept tugging at the corners of my mind. The way she'd still disappear for hours with vague explanations. The way her phone lit up late at night with messages she didn't respond to around me. The brief flickers of defensiveness if I asked too many questions. And through it all, this sudden push toward the future. It felt strategic, like a distraction. One night, after she'd gone to bed, I stayed up scrolling through listings she'd favorited. I should have felt excited, but instead I felt hollow. Like I was watching someone build a future with me while simultaneously retreating from the present. The worst part was I couldn't say anything about it without sounding paranoid or insecure. She hadn't done anything, not that I could prove, not that she'd admit to. And so I kept quiet. I nodded along. I asked questions about hardwood floors and kitchen islands. I tried to believe we were still building something together. But somewhere deep down, I knew the ground beneath us wasn't solid. And soon, I'd find out just how far she'd already stepped away from me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of overcast, nothing special kind of day. I'd wrapped up a client call early, and since my afternoon meeting got rescheduled, I decided to surprise Julia with lunch. We hadn't done something spontaneous in a while, and with all the house hunting talk, I figured it might be nice to break the routine and spend a few hours together. Something simple, something normal. I remember stopping at her favorite sandwich place and grabbing 2 orders. I even got that ridiculous sparkling water she liked, the one with elderflower and grapefruit that always made her feel a little fancy. I was humming by the time I pulled into our driveway. The blinds were half drawn, which wasn't unusual. Her car was in the garage. Everything looked regular. The front door wasn't locked. That I noticed. I pushed it open and stepped inside, expecting to hear music playing or the faint sound of a conference call in the background. But it was quiet. Too quiet. I remember saying her name once, softly. No answer. I called it again, louder this time. Still nothing. Then I heard something. It wasn't talking. It wasn't footsteps. It was the unmistakable sound of movement upstairs. Rhythmic. Inconsistent. Bed springs. A laugh. It hit me like a physical thing. My whole body tensed. I stood there for a second, frozen, my brain trying to catch up with what my ears were telling me. I walked up the stairs slowly, not out of stealth, but because my legs suddenly didn't trust themselves to move. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. That was all it took. I pushed it open and found her, Julia, in our bed, naked, straddling a man I'd never seen before. She turned at the sound of the door, and I'll never forget the look on her face. Not guilt, not horror, just a flicker of annoyance. Like I'd interrupted a meeting. Like I was the one out of place. She grabbed the blanket, stumbled off the bed, stammered something incoherent. The guy, mid-30s, smug, sweaty, had the nerve to ask, "Who the hell is this?" I didn't say a word. I just stared. At the bed we picked out together. At the woman who used to press her forehead to mine and whisper how grateful she was that we found each other. At the absurdity of this moment. The way my heart didn't even break right away. It just stopped. Julia was suddenly pleading. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." Like it was a timing issue. Like the real betrayal was me walking in too early. I dropped the bag of sandwiches on the floor and turned around. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't collapse. I walked out of the house we'd made together, down the stairs, into the dull afternoon light, and sat in my car with the engine off, hands shaking. I'd spent months second-guessing my instincts. I tried to rationalize, to trust, to make room for us to reconnect. But the truth had been lying in our bed all along. I didn't go back inside right away. I sat in the car for maybe 15 minutes, trying to breathe like a normal person. My heart was a drum. My hands were locked around the steering wheel even though I wasn't driving. What do you even do after something like that? What's the proper next step when your entire life rips open in the span of 30 seconds? I went back in like a storm. I wasn't quiet this time. I walked up the stairs with purpose, and when I opened that bedroom door again, they were still there, half-dressed, fumbling, caught somewhere between guilt and confusion. I didn't speak to him. I didn't need to. I looked straight at Julia and said, calmly, too calmly, "Get out." She started with excuses. I was confused. I thought we were. "No," I snapped. "You asked me for an open marriage." I said no. "You didn't get confused. You made a decision. Now live with it." The guy had finally managed to put his shirt back on. Man, I didn't know she was married. I cut him off with one glare. "You can shut up now." I gave them 5 minutes to leave. That's all. No discussion. No negotiation. I stood in the hallway while they scrambled to gather their things. Him holding one shoe, her still pleading in fragments. When they were out the door, I locked it behind them and turned toward the house we'd built. The place that suddenly felt like a crime scene. Then I started tearing her life down. I pulled every drawer, every closet. Her clothes? Thrown out the window, piece by piece. Her shoes, her makeup, that obnoxious self-care corner she curated with candles and tiny motivational signs. Gone. Tossed like trash. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I was cold, focused. I packed her personal files into a box and left them outside. I deleted her digital access. No more banking logins. No shared calendars. No cloud storage. Every password she knew was changed within the hour. And then I remembered something else. The name. When she was trying to explain herself, still wrapped in a sheet, stumbling over lies, she mentioned him by name. "It's not what you think. Derek's going through stuff with his wife. Her name's Melanie. It's not." That's what she said. And that was her mistake. Melanie. I found her online within 20 minutes. I crafted a message that didn't rant or accuse, just stated facts. "Hi, Melanie. You don't know me. I believe your husband Derek is having an affair with my wife Julia. I walked in on them today. I thought you should know." I attached a photo I took on my way out. Just enough proof. No context. No embellishment. She responded within the hour. "Thank you for telling me. This isn't the first time. I needed this to finally leave." I sat back and exhaled for the first time that day. Julia texted that night. Called. Left voicemails. "I'm sorry, I messed up," she said. "I was scared of losing myself. I didn't know how to talk to you." Each message more frantic than the last. I didn't respond. Not one word. The next morning, I blocked her number. She had nothing left here. No access. No sympathy. No place in the life she'd set fire to. She thought she could have it both ways, stability and thrill, safety and secrecy. But now she had nothing. And I had clarity. The silence after everything ended was deafening, but in a way I needed. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. I wasn't trying to read between the lines of a text message or make excuses for why someone I loved was pulling away. There was no more guessing. The floor had collapsed, and now I was standing on solid ground again, even if it was just bare dirt. I took a week off work. I told my clients I needed some time, no explanation beyond that. I cleaned the house top to bottom, donated every remaining trace of her I could find, and took a long, slow inventory of my life. It was strange, walking through rooms that still held the shape of us. The kitchen table we bought after too many hours arguing at IKEA, the scratch on the floor from when she dropped that heavy mirror. Every corner had a ghost in it, but they started to fade. Eventually, I listed the house. I didn't want to live in a place that held so many lies, no matter how good the lighting was. I moved into a smaller place across town, nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. The kind of place where I could hear myself think. I bought new furniture. I planted herbs in the kitchen window. I let the quiet stretch out without rushing to fill it. And then, slowly, I started living again. I reconnected with a few old friends I'd neglected. I started going to the gym more regularly. I picked up running, not because I loved it, but because the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement made the noise in my head a little easier to manage. I read more, cooked more, took long walks without my phone. It was on one of those walks that I met Anna. She was sitting at a dog park bench with a book in her lap and a golden retriever at her feet. We exchanged a few comments about the weather, the dogs, the book she was reading. She had a calmness about her, grounded, unhurried. We started meeting there every few days, then for coffee. No pressure. No expectations. Just two people sharing space and seeing where it might go. What I noticed first was how she listened. Not the performative kind of listening, but real attention. When I spoke, she didn't rush to respond or fix anything, she just held the moment with me. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't volunteer it. That part of me wasn't a secret, but it wasn't the centerpiece either. With Anna, I felt present again. Not broken, not suspicious. Just there. We're not rushing into anything. There's no big declaration, no timelines. It's just honest. And that's more than enough for me right now. Julia never reached out again, or if she did, I wouldn't know. I blocked her on everything. She's a closed chapter. I don't hate her anymore. I don't need to. She made her choices. I made mine. And now, for the first time in a long time, I'm making choices for me. Not out of fear. Not out of survival. But because I finally see a future that's mine to build. Looking back, I can see how easy it is to mistake quiet patterns for safety. We built a life that looked stable from the outside, the routines, the shared meals, the framed photos smiling back at us from bookshelves. But beneath it all, things had been slipping long before I noticed. Or maybe I just didn't want to notice. There are still days I replay certain moments, the day she asked for an open marriage, the way her eyes darted when I said no, the sound of the bed springs creaking before I knew exactly what I was about to walk in on. Those memories come without warning, like bruises that haven't fully faded, but they don't hurt the same way anymore. They don't control me. I learned more about myself in the silence that followed than I ever could have during the chaos. I learned how quickly someone can rewrite the story you thought you were living, and how important it is to be willing to walk away when the pages stop making sense. I used to think loyalty meant staying, even when things got uncomfortable. Now I know that real loyalty starts with yourself. I don't talk about Julia much now. When people ask what happened, I keep it simple. We grew apart. It's true enough. The details don't matter anymore. Not to me. Not to the life I'm building. Anna and I still see each other. Things are good. Not perfect. We're both honest about what we're carrying, but real. We don't make promises we can't keep. We don't pretend to know where everything's headed. We just show up for each other, consistently. And that's more than enough. Sometimes I think about the version of me that existed before all of this. The man who second-guessed his instincts, who over-explained himself to someone who had already checked out, who confused endurance with love. I don't miss him. I understand him. But I've let him go. What I have now is mine. The peace. The clarity. The right to wake up each morning without wondering what's being hidden behind a smile. In the end, the betrayal didn't define me. It revealed me. And somehow, on the other side of it, I found something that feels like strength. Not loud. Not angry. Just steady. Just enough.